All right, let's dive in. Have you ever looked at the price of something, a stock, maybe some crypto, even a house, and just thought to yourself, this is absolutely insane. This makes no sense. Well, you're not alone. Today, we're unpacking the wild psychology behind market bubbles with a fascinating idea called the greater fool theory. So yeah, the big question is why? Why do market bubbles even happen? How do prices get so disconnected from reality, soaring up to these unbelievable heights, only to inevitably come crashing back down? It's a puzzle that's baffled people for literally centuries. Well, it turns out the answer has less to do with spreadsheets and fundamentals and way more to do with what's going on inside our own heads. You see, during these market extremes, whether it's total euphoria or sheer panic, prices are being driven by our collective psychology, our hopes, our fears, and that powerful herd instinct. And the key that really unlocks this whole mystery, the thing that helps us understand all this seemingly irrational behavior, is a brilliantly simple concept. It's called the greater fool theory. Okay, so here's the theory in a nutshell. It basically says that you can make a ton of money buying something that you know is overvalued as long as you can find someone else, a greater fool, who's willing to buy it from you for an even higher price down the road. See, the game isn't about what the asset is actually worth. It's all about finding that next person in line. The absolute best way to picture this is like a giant, high-stakes game of musical chairs. The asset, that's the chair. And your goal isn't to own the chair forever. Heck no. The goal is to sell your seat to somebody else for a profit, right before the music stops. And when you're in the middle of it, the logic feels kind of bulletproof, right? First, you buy an asset. Maybe you even have a hunch it's overpriced. Then, you just sit back and watch as a whole crowd of other people piles in, pushing the price higher and higher. And finally, you sell it to one of those new buyers, the so-called greater fool, and you walk away with a nice profit. What could go wrong? So, how does this simple little game spiral out of control and become a massive, market-wide bubble? Well, it all comes down to the super powerful psychological engine that's fueling the whole thing. It all starts with the logic of hype. There's this amazing story about the asset, this positive narrative, that creates a real sense of urgency. And that kicks off a massive, massive wave of FOMO, the fear of missing out. I mean, you look around and it feels like everyone is getting rich but you. So what happens? We have this collective suspension of disbelief. All the old school ways of figuring out what something is worth, they get thrown right out the window. At that point, the only thing that matters is that the price just keeps going up. And this chart just shows the disconnect perfectly. It's so clear. Look at that. The intrinsic value, what the thing is actually fundamentally worth, it's just kind of chugging along, staying pretty stable. But meanwhile, the market price, fueled by all that pure psychology, is just blasting off into the stratosphere. And that huge gap between the two, that's the bubble. But here's the thing. Every party has to end, right? And while it's almost impossible to call the exact top of a bubble, there are some really subtle signs that the music is starting to fade and the game might be coming to an end. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. You start to see this critical divergence. On the surface, the price is still going up, maybe even faster than before, as that last wave of buyers gets sucked in by the hype. But underneath all that, a really key indicator, the trading volume, is starting to get weaker. That means fewer and fewer actual transactions are happening. The pool of fresh buyers, it's starting to dry up. The momentum keeps it going for just a little while longer, until all of a sudden, there's nobody left to buy. And this quote just absolutely nails it. A bubble doesn't pop just because prices got too high. No, it pops because it runs out of fuel. It runs out of that constant stream of new people willing to pay more. The whole chain just breaks. Okay, so what is the big lesson in all of this for anyone out there trying to make sense of the markets? It's all about understanding the psychological game that might be in play. When you really stop and think about it, the biggest risk isn't just paying a high price for something. People pay high prices for things all the time. That's not the real danger. The real risk, the ultimate risk, is being the last one holding the bag. It's being the last fool. The person who's stuck with the asset when the music finally stops and there is absolutely no one left to sell to. So let's just recap the big takeaways here. First, bubbles are driven by our collective psychology, not just by the numbers. Second, this theory isn't really about how smart or dumb any one person is, it's about the very structure of the market itself. And finally, remember this. The crash happens because the market simply runs out of new buyers. Which really leaves us with one last big question for you to think about. The next time you see some asset just going parabolic, ask yourself this: am I buying this because I believe in its real value? Or am I just betting I can find a greater fool?